Welcome to Dizzy Resolve. I'm Dr. Vicky Stewart, a dizziness recovery specialist with over 15 years of experience as a vestibular physiotherapist with a PhD in dizziness disorders. If you're living with chronic dizziness, whether it's vestibular migraine, triple PD, MDDS, anxiety-related dizziness, or something your doctors can't quite explain, you're in the right place. At Dizzy Resolve, we bring together science-backed education, real recovery stories, and a whole person approach. So you can move from confusion and fear to more clarity, calm, and confidence. You'll also hear from a range of experts across medicine, movement, mindset, and more, because lasting healing means looking at the whole picture. Please note, this content is for general education only and is not a substitute for medical advice. So always speak with your healthcare provider before making any changes. Subscribe now and let's change what's possible.
Hello and welcome to Dizzy Resolve. Kira, I'm really excited today because Kira has come on to join me to talk about gut health. And you might be thinking, I have dizziness, I have brain fog, I have, all these other symptoms. I don't have a gut problem. And the reason I brought Kira on today is because gut health does matter, especially when we're talking about chronic symptoms and healing from a whole mind-body approach, or maybe even a mind-body-soul approach. And Kira is a functional nutritionist. She's going to be able to talk to this a bit more as to her credentials, but a functional medicine trained nutritionist, a naturopath, a hypnotist, and has a long list of credentials, because you all know that it's worth knowing who you're learning from and who you're listening to. So welcome, Kira.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Thanks for being here. I'm excited to talk about all things gut health in relation to the type of symptoms my audience has. But can we just hear from you, like, how did you get into this? What is your credentials, and what business do you have on the side as well?
Yeah, I'm going to try to condense this because there were a few things that led me to this place, but I was the kid that dealt with chronic digestive issues well into my 20s, and I hit a bit of a breaking point. I was a middle school teacher. I was teaching English. And I thought, maybe if I just learn about nutrition and change my diet, some of my digestive issues will go away. It did help immensely. So, was working on my nutrition degree. By the time I graduated, I said, I think I want to do this for a living. And that was the shift into being a nutritionist. But shortly after, my son was born and my husband was diagnosed with autoimmune hepatitis, which was a scary diagnosis to get. Prognosis was not good. And that's when I started searching for answers, saying, this doesn't seem right. Like, why would the body start to fail overnight? You were fine yesterday and today you're not. This doesn't make sense to me. And so I started looking up more alternative doctors in the area and found something called a functional medicine MD. And this was new to me, and read up on him and said, I like this approach. It's whole body. We're not looking at symptoms in isolation. It's how is everything in the body connected, because it truly is. And within 6 months, his liver enzymes were back to normal. He was feeling good. I mean, I won't get into all of that, but it was life-saving for him. And so that spiraled me into wanting to study functional medicine, because I was like, this is so important. Like, this needs to be brought to the world. And so that kind of led me to where I am today.
Because our stories, I'm not sure if I shared with you before we started recording, but our stories are so similar in that we were trained in a traditional sense, me physiotherapy, and then had a family member have an issue that we had to go just a second and pause and be like, this can't just be dealt with in the way that we had been trained from our education side of things, traditional sense. And we had to delve and find these alternative strategies. And that's like, you have this whole aha moment. And you're like, how did I miss this before? And I can't go back to practicing only with that traditional boundary. So it's fascinating that these things happen in our lives, not to us, but for us, to get us on the right path of how we can help our people. So the people that I help have, it might be vestibular migraine, it might be triple PD, persistent postural sexual dizziness, it may be anxiety causing dizziness, they might have a physical vestibular issue in the inner ear, but it's led into chronic symptoms, a wide range. But they have chronic symptoms that sometimes are just there all the time, and for others that flare up and down. And I'd love to just for you to take us through the bare basics of really, why am I bringing you on, someone who helps with gut issues, to link that with symptoms of dizziness, brain fog, fatigue, healing.
And this, I mean, it's a loaded question because there's so many pieces we could put together here. But I said it already. Everything in the body truly is connected. And I think sometimes people will look at symptoms completely in isolation. Oh, I've got vestibular migraines and I've got fatigue and I've got joint pain. It's three completely separate issues. It's like somehow, some way, they are tied together, and that's what needs to be pieced together. And the gut, a lot of times, is essentially at the center of all of this. We have something called the gut-brain highway, or the enteric nervous system. So the gut is always communicating with the brain. And if we're looking at things in the simplest form, it would make sense then that dizziness, migraines, some of that could stem simply from that. So it's working on the vagus nerve and strengthening that. And then we can also get into other things of our gut is where we're digesting and assimilating nutrients. And a lot of these nutrients we have to be consuming. The body doesn't make everything on its own. It makes some vitamins. It doesn't make any minerals. And so if we become deficient in certain things, whether we're not consuming them, or let's say we have some type of gut flora imbalance, we have some pathogen that's stealing them, we have poor stomach acid or digestive enzyme output, and we're not able to assimilate the nutrients. Like, we're eating a really healthy diet, but it's not getting in. That's also going to lead to some of those symptoms potentially. So it doesn't mean that everyone needs to run out and go, oh my gosh, all of my issues are just gut related, but it's something to keep in the back of your mind.
Yeah, and it's finding all the pieces of the puzzle where when someone only addresses it as this is a vestibular problem and I only need to address it from a physical perspective in the inner ear and brain, that's when we run into trouble, where we don't have all the pieces of the puzzle to put together yet. And yeah, gut health, I think, is one piece to that puzzle. So what are some of the signs of gut dysfunction, or what would be, some of the obvious and less obvious problems that someone might have that makes you think, this is one of your pieces to your puzzle?
Yeah. So, I mean, the obvious is going to be digestive issues, right? Bloating, stomach pain, distension, gas, constipation, things like that. People just assume that's what makes up a gut issue. But then really, I just tell people those are just simply digestive issues. Yes, they stem from the gut, but they're pretty obvious. Some not so obvious things are going to be nutrient deficiencies, like I mentioned. Chronic migraines can be one, hormone imbalances, joint pain, brain fog. I mean, the list goes on. A weakened immune system, autoimmunity. I could keep going. So there are so many things that present as something else, and people think that they're completely unrelated, but they're not. And so I'm actually going to go back to my husband with the autoimmune hepatitis. Yes, it's a liver thing, so that's part of the digestive system. It's gut related, but two massive pieces. Now, you mentioned puzzle pieces. There are always multiple. Rarely is it just, oh, it's just this one teeny tiny little thing. There are multiple. But with him, two really big ones stood out. He had a lot of imbalance in his gut flora, and he also had celiac disease. And he did not know that and was diagnosed in his late 30s. So lo and behold, he had been eating gluten for years, not realizing that that was actually wreaking havoc on his body. And so when those puzzle pieces were put together, two of the really big things that came out of it were that he had a lot of gut flora imbalance, not enough of the commensal or the good guys, and too many of the bad or the opportunistic. So we had a lot of pathogens. That on its own can wreak a lot of havoc. But then on top of that, he also had celiac disease and did not know it. And so for years he was eating gluten, and with the autoimmune hepatitis, the initial diagnosis, he lost about 20 pounds in a matter of a month. And so he was eating everything he could in sight, which included tons of carbs, which in reality was making things worse. And so, again, most people in that community just think, oh, my body's attacking itself. There's usually a gut piece there.
Because there are definitely a proportion of my people that I help that have autoimmune conditions, and it's to an extent where there's not a coincidence there. And it's interesting to tie it then back to a gut health perspective and how much that's playing a part. That's fascinating. And I know you said before, yeah.
Sorry, I don't want to interrupt, but
No,
there's
not at
some
all.
fascinating research by Dr. Fasano and others on autoimmunity, and they say 100% of the time, they're not even saying 90% of the time anymore, 100% of the time, those with any type of autoimmune condition have some sense of leaky gut or intestinal permeability, which is the more clinical term. So there's a gut issue if there's autoimmune.
Fascinating. Okay, well, that's a big one. And yeah, you've said before that you said something like that you could take all the supplements in the world, but it won't fix what caused the imbalance. What's your take on supplements and how to address this, not just with, yeah, because, going back to a traditional model, a lot of people that come to me, it's like, okay, you've got this diagnosis, take this medication. And then that medication leads to that problem and they end up either not tolerating the medication or it doesn't help them. Now, for some people, medications are fabulous and they work really well and they're needed. But for the people that end up coming to me, the medications often have made things worse or haven't really addressed all the problems with, of course, secondary things. So that's medications, but I'd love your take on supplements, because I think we're starting as health practitioners starting to know that supplements are needed, but maybe there's an education little missing piece there. So I'd love your take on it.
Yeah, and I probably take a different approach. So initially getting trained in functional medicine, I think many of us are learning about different labs, different supplements, different protocols. And so we get a little excited about them. And so that was my big push in the beginning of, okay, and over the years, I realized we're just replacing medications with supplements. Still has to be processed by the liver. Most of the time, it's still synthetic. So what is the difference? And so I do think supplements can be used, absolutely, but we have to look at what purpose are they serving. So I kind of have criteria, and this could be important because I know a lot of people out there are taking supplements, and this is one of the top questions I get. For one, if you're doing it, maybe it's to fill a gap that you have nutritionally speaking, right? So magnesium, I'm going to throw that one out. It's a big one to help with headaches, migraines. A lot of people are deficient. If you're not getting enough in your diet, I totally understand why you're taking magnesium. However, sometimes we get to people who are taking a ton of things just because they saw it on TikTok, somebody on Instagram had a really good carousel, and everybody should be taking turmeric and boswellia and, all of these different things. And that's when I say those can be good short term as triage while you're figuring out what is actually going on. So I think supplements absolutely have their place, but if we're not digging into the root of the problem, then yeah, you can take all the supplements in the world, but if you're stressed out beyond belief, you haven't addressed the pathogens in your gut, you're not eating a nutrient-dense diet, and you hate your job, those supplements aren't going to do much for you. So that's
This is where that mind-body approach comes in, that it's not just treating the physical body. It's not just looking at the lab results and going, okay, you're deficient here, take this one. It's got to be a bigger perspective than that. And I think we're both addressing that with our people. I know that there's a lot of myths get thrown around in regard to gut health. It seems to be, popularized recently, that gut health, it's in our face a lot more in the recent years. But I'd love to, hear what you think are the myths that we should be aware of, like the idea that everyone should take prebiotics or everyone should avoid all gluten or all dairy or things like that. What's your take?
I have a lot of them. So the funny thing is the first one you said is a big one. Should I just take a probiotic? And that's the thing. I feel like a lot of people are out there taking a probiotic. sometimes it can make things worse because if we don't know what bacteria are in your gut, I'm going to give an example. I won't get into the very specifics, but let's say lactobacillus. Okay, there's multiple strains of that. But let's say someone continues to take the same probiotic that's lactobacillus over and over and over, but they already had an abundance and they needed more bifidobacteria, more something else. We're just creating an overgrowth or fueling an overgrowth at that point. So sometimes it's not a great idea. What I do tell people though, here's a tip. If you're going to take a probiotic because you're insistent on it, rotate the strains. Don't keep on the same probiotic month after month after month. Every other bottle, something entirely different. But that's a really common myth that everyone should just take a probiotic. I actually disagree with that, and I'm very strategic based on symptoms or based on testing, if we have testing about what type or strains of probiotics someone actually needs. I would also say another myth is, the gluten. So it probably sounds like I think gluten is bad after talking about my husband. I don't think gluten or any whole food is inherently bad. Now, if you ask me about a Twinkie or Oreos, I don't view those as whole foods. Those are processed, they're made in a factory. So something that's made in a factory gets its own category, but something that's found in nature that's not highly processed, I don't have an issue with it. So I don't believe everyone needs to avoid gluten. There's a big craze right now. I don't know how it is where you are, but here in the States, the big one is sourdough or fresh milled flour. So people are starting to, do their own flour again. We're not doing that obviously with my husband and his celiac, but I have many clients that are doing those and they're totally fine. So I don't think that gluten is bad. I don't think that dairy is bad. I think it really does come down to bioindividuality and looking at the person and what they're going through. And this is also something where people assume, oh, I've got these chronic health issues. I need to keep restricting foods. So not just gluten and dairy, but let me try a GAPS diet. Let me try an elimination diet. Let me try carnivore, anything out there. But then they start developing a fear of food and they think that that's going to be the fix. And it's not. We want a diverse diet for the microbiome. Do you want me to keep going with myths? Because I'm
You
sure I've got
mentioned
more.
elimination. No, it's fascinating you mentioned elimination diet because with vestibular migraine, for example, the vestibular physiotherapy education that we're taught is to offer people to look at what foods trigger their migraines, which is fine. But one of the methods is an elimination diet, to remove all of these potential triggers and then bring one in back at a time to see which one triggers the migraine. And I'm guilty of this. I've taught that for a long time when I have my physiotherapy hat on. But once I know all of this, it's like it just seems bananas that you would only recommend that without then being able to think about all the different things that could contribute to triggering their symptoms. And it's only now doing this work in Dizzy Resolve that I've been doing for years now and seeing the impact that education from a physiotherapist, that, they were told to do this elimination diet or they were told to strictly avoid this whole particular food. And then the fear that comes with that has then shrunken their world to the point where they're like, well, I don't want to go to that restaurant or out with friends to a cafe because I don't know if I'll be able to eat anything. And it just goes, gets smaller and smaller unnecessarily. And it was partly probably because they weren't led in the right way by their therapist, or the therapist wasn't aware that they were developing these fears on the side and the timeframes weren't restricted and all of that sort of thing. Do you see that as well?
I do, and that's the thing. I'm not opposed to elimination diets. There's definitely times I recommend them, but I'm always telling my clients, this is short term. This is not meant to be long term. If you're reacting to everything that we add back in, then this is a massive clue that either immune system, gut, something else is imbalanced. It's great if we can eliminate things for 4 weeks, reintroduce one by one, and oh my goodness, this one thing is causing some issues. Okay, great. We've got some good data. The goal is still going to be to reintroduce it ultimately, again, assuming like it's a whole nutrient food, which it would be typically. But that's the problem, is so many are not given the guidelines for this is short term, or they're told you need to do this for 6 months or 12 months. And that, in my opinion, is far too long.
Yeah, exactly. I completely agree. I think most of my listeners know that I come from a place of looking at the nervous system and looking at how emotions and unexpected, stressful, or unpleasant situations may have contributed to the development of their symptoms or be contributing to the persistence of their symptoms. I wondered if you had the same angle with working with gut issues.
I do. Because I mean, part of it goes back to that gut brain highway, but that nervous system is controlling a lot. If we just, again, in simple terms, if we look at it as, is the body in fight or flight or freeze or fawn, or are we in rest and digest? The body is only meant to digest things in a rest and digest state. So if we're in fight or flight, which many are, even just looking at how people eat on the way to a meeting, in the car, scrolling on their phones, already we've slowed or halted those digestive secretions, and we're not digesting and assimilating things. And so it leads to a whole host of things. So the nervous system to me is a profound piece because again, it goes back to, are we digesting and assimilating, but also back to the supplements, back to anything. Our nervous system, if we're stuck in one of those states that's not serving us, that on its own can create dysbiosis, which is just a fancy term for an imbalance of gut flora, but it does, and it lowers stomach acid. And so there's a whole host of things that come from a dysregulated nervous system. And you and I know that many people aren't paying attention to that, or they don't know what to do, or yeah.
So I'll just zoom out a little bit so that, because I'm learning along with these conversations as well to an extent. So if someone has a, say, a vestibular problem and it is causing them distress and it's contributing to their nervous system state being in a fight-flight state, and then that being stuck or being in that state for more than a healthy amount of time and not being able to go into their rest and digest state, then contributes to the gut issues, which then feeds back into the nervous system issues, which then feeds back into their escalation of dizziness, etc. symptoms. So there's that pathway. And then there's also, there could be another little angle coming in here where the gut issues may be part of a contributor to the development of their initial dizziness symptoms, brain fog, fatigue type symptoms as well. Is that, have I got that?
You nailed it. And
Yeah.
I'm always telling people you're on the hamster wheel. We have to get you off the hamster wheel because it becomes this vicious cycle, which is why we can't just focus on the physiological. Like it's got to have that mind, body, spirit connection.
100%. It's how do you go about it with the stored emotions and the unprocessed stress to do with gut issues? Like, is it because the way we do it is looking at the nervous system and being aware. Awareness is obviously key of what nervous system state you're in, and then how to put in strategies in those times to shift in between those states, because it's normal to be in different states. We're not trying to only be in a rest digest state. But do you do the same thing looking at with your work?
Yeah, I do. It's conversations with clients, and I mean, my clients know it's sprinkled into every single conversation we have because it's so important. And many times people think, okay, breaking it down, nervous system, oh, it's stress related. I don't feel that stressed. Well, then I'm asking them, well, what does your day look like? How do you start your day when, before you even get out of bed? Are you scrolling on your phone because that's dysregulating your nervous system? Or what are your thoughts that are running through your head throughout the day? Are they mostly positive? Are they mostly negative? Where's the tension living in your body? What does it look like at dinner time? Like a lot of these questions will come in, not to say like, got you, you are stressed out, but this is what we need to do. You didn't even recognize these patterns. Like, oh, you can't relax. That's a really big one. I feel lazy when I sit down. So there's a lot of the conversation and just like you said, different tools of, okay, well, how can we navigate this? Because we're never going to be in a stress-free state. It's not going to happen. Life goes on. Life itself is stressful. Having relationships, doing anything is stressful, but it's what are the things you're doing to bring the body back into homeostasis?
Yeah, absolutely. The speaking my talk and the not being able to rest part really rings true. Sometimes it's, yeah. And like we're all guilty of that to an extent. We talk about, this boom bust type cycle or avoidance behaviors. And sometimes people, flip between and have both issues where they feel okay one day. So they're like, okay, I'm going to fit in my whole week's worth of things that I have to do because I feel great today. And then they bust, and then their symptoms are, larger than they would be if they didn't have that boom phase in that day. And then there's the avoidance behaviors where they just, the fear of that it may bring it on. That what if thinking, what if it causes this, what if it triggers that, I better just not do it, so I'm just going to avoid it. I'm safer if I just avoid it. Do you have the same issues with your clientele?
Absolutely. And it's everything goes in a wave. And my clients are dealing with chronic issues. Now, they may present differently than yours. Mine don't always come to me with just classic digestive symptoms either, but it's the same thing. Some really good days and then some really bad days and some really good days. And it's the same pattern, just different triggers.
Yeah, yeah. And for someone watching this who, after listening to this even, or if they suspect that their gut is involved with their dizziness or their chronic symptoms, what would be the next steps, like the first few things that you'd want them to start paying attention to start with? And then maybe even like what tests or who do they see, that type of sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I do, being a nutritionist first and foremost, obviously I'm starting with diet, but not in a restrictive way. I tell people I'm a realist, I'm not a purist. I used to be, but I'm not anymore. So looking at diet and making it sure that it's, 90, 95% whole foods, nutrient dense, lots of variety. The microbiome really does love diversity. So if someone looks at their diet and says like, I just like broccoli and carrots. Those are the only two vegetables I eat. And I don't like fruit. Okay, well, we're not really feeding the microbiome there. It's just getting the same things over and over. So really work on diversifying. One of the things I love to tell my clients is every week or every time you go to the grocery store or the farmer's market, pick up something that you've never had, you can't remember having, or it's been a really long time. So we're just rotating foods in there. It's a wonderful way to diversify gut flora. I would also say that stress piece. That stress piece is huge when it comes to gut, especially for my people when they are dealing with digestive issues. They don't always make the connection, but they do eventually with me that, oh my gosh, my IBS symptoms flare up or something else comes on when stress is high. So really doing things every single day and sprinkled throughout the day that calm the nervous system, whether it's pausing and just checking in with your breathing and going, oh, my shoulders were up here and I was holding my breath. Well, take a nice deep breath in into your diaphragm and take a longer exhale. Do that a few times. You can be ridiculously busy and fit that into your day. So just little things to calm the nervous system throughout the day. And then in regard to testing or who to see, I don't always jump to testing anymore. There's a time and a place for a comprehensive stool test. So I don't know what it's like there. Here in the States, if you go to your, conventional doctor, they may just suggest a colonoscopy, or something like a parasite test, which is just gonna, test the ova. It's not a comprehensive stool test. We're not looking at the microbiome or any of that. Sometimes that can be really helpful if we really need to see what is going on in there. And then people that run that are going to be someone that's trained in functional medicine, integrative medicine, some naturopaths, not all. Those are kind of the people to look for.
Perfect. I think you might have, I don't know if there's anything to add to this about like what are those gut nourishing foods or practices that go beyond, supplements or eliminations?
Yeah. I really like getting in some type of fermented foods. Like that's a good way to feed beneficial bacteria if we're not going the probiotic route, which I tend to prefer. So anything fermented, sauerkraut, kimchi, beet kvass. And I tell people if you're not making it, just make sure when you go to the grocery store, it's in the refrigerated aisle, not the shelf stable. So
Okay.
yeah, fermented foods are great. Um, Bone broth, this could also go to a myth. There's a lot of people that swear that bone broth heals all. Part of it is the amino acids, the glutamine. If someone isn't dealing with histamine issues and that's not contributing to their migraines, then bone broth really can be very healing to that intestinal lining. And then we don't pay enough attention to things like resistant starches. I don't know if those ever come up. Might be the first one to say it on one of these calls, but things like cooked and cooled rice and potatoes are resistant to being digested, which is actually a good thing. It's food for the microbes. So the process of cooking the potatoes and the rice, throwing it in the fridge, and then taking it out the next day, you can still reheat it. It's created that resistant starch, which is very beneficial. Other foods that also fit into that, if you don't want to cook and cool rice or potatoes, jicama, artichokes, asparagus. I know I'm missing some in here. Garlic and onions would be other ones.
It's fascinating. That's the first time I've heard about that side of things, and it just shows you that we need you. You're doing such amazing work. Because it's hard to cut through all the noise of what we should be eating and what we shouldn't be. Sometimes
And
that feels a little overwhelming for people who are dealing with, or anybody, but especially those who are dealing with their chronic symptoms and they're trying to find their way. So,
yeah.
do you have any stories that you can share of maybe someone who had either brain fog, fatigue, or dizziness, or that my type of client that had some sort of shift by looking at their gut health? Put you on the spot there.
You are, and I'm like, I'm racking my brain going back. I mean, I'll be honest, most of my clients come with brain fog and fatigue. Like that's such a common one. But I feel like most practitioners would say that, whether it's, they're focused on gut, they're focused on hormones or something else. It seems to be a byproduct of everything else because
Yeah.
in my eyes, the body starts to give us little whispers as to things going wrong. And some of those little whispers are brain fog and fatigue because it's not major, right? It's just, oh, okay, I've got a little brain fog. I must have not slept well, or oh, I must be stressed out. And we just kind of brush it off. Same thing with the fatigue until it gets so bad, the body's now screaming. So while I cannot, I mean, I could sit here, but I don't want to do that. Most of my clients are dealing with that, and by the end of us working together, whatever that looks like, it's gone. Now, I do want to say a lot of times, throwing in another tip here, yes, it's gut related. So as we clear out any pathogens or rebalance the population in there, things get better. But then we go back to that assimilation. A lot of times that fatigue is due to low B vitamins. So I'm just throwing that one out there to people if you need to Google what foods are high in B vitamins or consider
Yes.
even some testing. A lot of times I do have one. Just reminded me when I said B vitamins. I have a client right now, and that's actually what she came to me for. She had some digestive issues, perimenopause, which is actually the majority of people that seek out alternative medicine are perimenopausal women because of all the shifts happening in our bodies. But so she came to me with the digestive issues, but intense fatigue and brain fog. And we tested her B12 levels, which I like to see just for reference, you guys, 800-ish. Hers were 200. Simply by working on gut health and talking about B vitamins, I mean, we're talking within weeks, she's like, I feel like a different person. So, yeah.
Amazing. Is there with the B vitamins any precautions that people need to think about before putting themselves on it?
Yes. Like with any, because that's the thing, there's different forms of supplements. There are some that aren't so ideal. There's genetic markers. I will say typically you're going to be okay if you look for a form that is methylated. So it'll say methyl B complex, so it's methylcobalamin, methylfolate. Now, then we can get into the nitpicky, which I won't do, but certain people or people with genetic markers and SNPs might not do well with a methyl form. They might do better with something else. But for someone listening that's like, I never thought about B vitamins and I don't eat a lot of meat, I'm just throwing something out there. Maybe I'll try a B complex, start with a methyl form, and just see how your body responds.
Yeah, perfect advice. And if someone listening is like, oh my gosh, I need to reach out to Kira, I want to work with her, I want to talk to her or find out how she can help, where do people find you?
Yeah, so my website is nourishedlifenutrition.com. I do work remotely with people all over the US and Canada. Sometimes we make exceptions for the UK and other places, depending. And then you can find me on Instagram. I'm not great on the social media piece, but it's at kirawhitham.nd.
Excellent. And we'll put those details in the bottom of these notes as well so that people can find you easily. But thank you so much for joining me and sharing so many tips and tricks and even just the biggest perspective of what might be another piece to someone's puzzle in regards to their healing journey. So thank you very much for joining me.
Absolutely. Thank you.
The information provided in this video is for general educational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the guidance of your physician or other qualified health professional with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or treatment, and never disregard professional medical advice or delay seeking it because of something you have seen or heard on Dizzy Resolve.